Welcome to part 5 of the IMX process. This is the continuation of step 4, the deploy step. Here we'll talk about hourly versus project fee approaches. Many of our consultants struggle with deciding whether to charge an hourly rate or a single project fee. We strongly recommend the project or value-based fee approach, and here's why the client will agree. The following are points to make to the client as to why they want a project fee. It always leaves focus on results, not activity, number one. They don't want to pay for activity. They want results. That's why they're hiring you. Number two, there's a cap on their investment. They know exactly what's to be spent, and there aren't going to be any surprises. Number three, there is never a meter running. In other words, they don't have to worry each time they call you and ask for your help or request that you might be there for an hour or a day or a week. Number four, it's unfair to them to place them in a position of making an investment decision every time they need that help. Otherwise, they're trying to determine the possible or the impossible. Is this an issue that justifies a $2,000 visit or a $500 phone call? No client should be ever put in that position. Number five, they should feel free to use your assistance and to ask for your help without feeling they have to go to someone for budgetary approval. This only makes them more resistant to sharing their views and at best delays the flow of important information that could impact significantly the value that you're delivering. Number six, if you find additional work that was unanticipated but must be performed, you can do it without having to go to them for additional funds. In those instances, legitimate additional work would otherwise be viewed as self-aggrandizing in an attempt to generate additional hours or days. Number seven, the overall set fee in relation to the project outcomes to be delivered is inevitable or inevitably less of a proportional investment than hourly billing. Okay? In another way of saying that, the set fee, the project outcome that you're delivering, is always going to be a single price, and of course when you project it properly, the value of that is always going to come out less if you're doing a good job than putting yourself down for an hourly fee. Number eight, this is the most uncomplicated way to work together. There will never be a debate about what was a billable time, example, travel or report writing, or what should be done on-site or off-site. It greatly simplifies the matter. Let's talk a little bit about pricing as well. Number one, being high is good. Perceived subconscious value, as we've talked about previously, of higher priced goods and services is always higher. Okay? Again, the more it costs, the more perceived value it contains. It also weeds out those bargain hunters who will drive you crazy and focus only on price, not value. Number two, on pricing. When you're just starting or hungry, it's easy to adopt a we'll take all comers attitude. You wouldn't advise your clients to do this when they're hiring, so take your own advice and don't do it when you're hiring new clients. Many of our consultants have told us that they hope to get referrals from one bargain hunter or a difficult client, so it's worth getting that client. The truth is that those clients only refer you to other bargain hunting difficult clients most of the time. Be selective in what clients you hire, based on your availability to help them, based on their availability and ability to work with you to help deliver the ultimate outcome that's going to improve your reputation for success, and all of you will enjoy the work better. Number three, if price is their only objective, your outcome is doomed from the start. Okay? Simply put, if all they're focused on is price, not value, then they're probably a company or a person within the company that's seeking to justify either their existence or their activity. They're looking to spend some money, but not a whole lot, and they want to be able to show that they're trying. If price is their main objective, it's very unlikely that the value, the benefit, is their primary objective. It just goes to reason. If value is the primary objective, that's the primary objective. There can be no other. If price is the primary objective, that's the only objective. There is no other. So whatever their top objective is, if it's price, most likely be ready to walk away from that. Number four, know when to walk away. Seth Godin writes in a great book on knowing when to quit, entitled The Dip. It's only a 79-page long book, so you can read it in one flight. It's a great book, and it talks about how the best know when to quit, and they do so often. If you're hanging in with difficult clients or trying to do what you can for one that needs much more than you can accomplish, know when to quit. Oftentimes, leaving the situation is a bigger benefit to you than sticking it out and not being the success that you need to be, that you're charging them to be. This is vital in the very beginning, before you even sign the contract. It's hard to turn away business, but when you're selective, your success will be much greater. Just remember, it's a hiring situation. You're hiring the client, and your reputation is at stake. Number 5, whenever a client comments on your price being too high, here's something that one of our consultants taught us that really worked for him. We talked about this, but let's review it here since we're specifically talking about price. He decided to quadruple his fees one year, mostly because he felt it would be easier than firing clients and he wanted to scale back. The result was that his business revenue quadrupled that year. Imagine that. Yes, he lost a fair amount of clients, but he kept the ones who really understood his value. He worked much less overall, and he made a lot more money and was a lot happier. The revenue we're talking about here, by the way, exceeds 7 figures by the end of that year. So this does work. Whenever someone says to him, "Wow, you're expensive," instead of trying to justify how he's that expensive or why he shouldn't be seen as that expensive, now he just simply says, without being too cocky, "I know." He stops right there. He refuses to say one single word more. He just says, "I know." I've done this myself and it actually works. So this is not some anomaly somewhere in some weird market or he's got some unique deliverable. A lot of people say to us all the time, "Gee, that product costs a lot more than some other what I might consider comparable product." And I end up saying, "I know. I did this as I'm sitting here today recording this. I did this just 1 week ago today." Okay? And the person ended up becoming a client, because the perceived value was such that they were intrigued as to what it was. They had belief, they had buy-in, they realized that they could probably get something that might be considered comparable, might do something similar, but it wasn't going to be the quality that they could get with Intermetrics. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about how to deal with people who always want a deal. Many consultants fail to fully appreciate that once you make a single concession on price, you've enabled a behavior that will inevitably cost you money and probably drive you crazy. Requests for price concessions generally emanate from the owners of small companies who are accustomed to haggling with everyone from the coffee vendor to the hourly employee, and who themselves are constantly asked to lower price from their customers many times. Or they're from a large company purchasing department and a low-level feasibility buyer who sees their way to fame and fortune as cutting back and saving the company money. There are several keys here. Never offer a concession without a quid pro quo. Once you lower fee, no matter how slightly, or delay the client's payment dates, no matter how little, you've opened a Pandora's box. The client, like Archimedes, will stick a lever in that slightly open door and rip it off its hinges. Be prepared to deny the request and walk away. If you don't call the customer's bluff, then you don't belong in the card game. We've had buyers whom we've had interviews tell us, "I always ask for a concession because I believe it's good business to ask." However, I'm often shocked at how often they grant these without any resistance, despite the fact that I'm seldom prepared to press the issue if I'm told no. Focus on the value proposition and the return on their investment. When buyers are especially resistant to price, but indicate they would go ahead with a price reduction, they're really saying that they believe you can help them, but they're not sure how much, so they want to hedge their bets. Demonstrate that even a conservative return will provide dramatic return on investment. This goes back to the scale that I've described, I believe, in part 3, talking about perceived value of the proposal and the value of the implications that they're suffering, the pain, the critical issues. Put those dollar amounts on those two sides of the scale. If you fail to show them the real value in the offering, if you fail to say, "I'm going to help you reduce turnover by 5%, which will increase revenue for you by $6.9 million, and I'm going to do that in a proposal that will cost you $45,000, you're not likely to get that proposal agreed. You're much less likely to get that contract, as opposed to just sticking it out there and saying, "Here's a $45,000 proposal for consulting that will hopefully increase your effectiveness in making hiring decisions, help you find better people, and reduce your turnover." Stop. Period. That's it. It doesn't tie any dollar to that amount. What's that look like visibly? I have a scale. On one side of the scale is a big, solid metal dollar sign that has a $45,000 value to it. And on the other side of that scale, a cloud that has some off in the ether idea of a perceived value that's not well quantified. It hasn't been made tangible. They haven't put a dollar amount on it. I haven't put a dollar amount on it as the client. And if I'm not involved in determining that that's a $6.9 million problem, I'm not likely to believe that it is. So even if you put dollars down on that side of the scale, on what the implication is really costing them in money, you still have to have them be the ones that decide what that dollar amount is. So if your clients are resisting price, it is a very, very good bet that you have not delivered the value proposition properly. You have not convinced them of the value. And that rests on your shoulders, not theirs. Okay? You've got to make sure and show them the real implications and how much that costs them financially. Don't leave it up to assumption. Don't assume that they'll realize that figure should be plugged in, and surely it's much less than or much more than what you're asking in your proposal. Okay? Also, offer non-monetary concessions. Some people just need the ego fulfillment of having received something for free or at a reduced price. If you have to, offer anything from a free book to complimentary quarterly updates to free newsletter subscriptions. Provide something to salvage their ego, okay? So it's not a win-lose proposition. Try not to take any value off the table without taking price off the table, but if you can, offer them something that's not really going to cost you anything. It seems as if it's a concession from your end. Avoid that win-lose, but if they won't allow you to, go ahead and set yourself up for that loss by giving in to their concessions and giving them more value, okay? But make that value something very, very inexpensive to you. Like I said, a copy of a free book that you've written, a white paper, a newsletter subscription, quarterly updates, monthly updates where you spend 30 minutes on the phone with the managers reviewing results. Something very insignificant and minor. All right. If, however, they do insist on those price concessions and you have to do something to reduce it, take that value off with price. We've talked about that before. Don't move price without moving value. Always provide options, even to small businesses. If the buyer says, I love option 3, but the fees seem a bit high, say, well, that's why we have option 2. We just talked about this in the last point. If they say, well, gee, but you're taking value off the table to go to option number 2, say, absolutely. The value is there. It's established. Unequivocally, it's worth it. It's the same as answering, wow, your prices are high with, I know. They're high because they are valuable. They work. Stop work if you're not paid on time. Okay? Deal seekers are famous for delaying payments to squeeze out extra work. If you're not paid in advance and a payment date has passed, allow 10 days and then stop working. Otherwise, you'll be in permanent debt to the company store. Now, for small business people like yourselves, as independent consultants, you cannot afford to find yourself playing accounts receivable all the time. Push for those payments up front. Push for a significant enough percentage of those payments up front to cover your absolute costs. So if anything is left on the table, it's raw profit. So 25%, 35%, 50% payment up front before work starts. Minimum of 25%, if your margins are set properly, will at least cover the real time that you invest, where if they do decide not to pay you, if something happens in the organization and they are a small company and they can no longer pay you after you started the work, you have at least not started that work without getting paid for the real time that you've put in, so it's not a total loss. We see it too many times. Small independent consultants working for small companies, something happens to the company where down the road they have to cut back and they just simply can't afford to pay what they owe to everybody. We struggled with this at Intermetrics, and we have since. You will see us living our speak here. We're walking the talk because you all buy your products in advance. You purchase credits up front from your Intermetrics account, and then they're locked in there, and they're saved. We were too small a company to play accounts receivable for all of the consultants around there that we were invoicing after the fact, post-usage. Then we would go 30 days net on those invoices. Then people would be late on paying. An incredible amount of time every month was spent figuring out who still owed what and trying to get them to pay it. And as small business owners, they weren't unethically not paying us. They simply just didn't have the ability to pay us. Their accounts hadn't paid them. So take a lesson from Intermetrics itself. Charge your clients up front. If you can, 100%. If not, 25 minimum. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about maximizing value to maximize income. The key to maximizing income is to give things away. It's not an oxymoron. Whenever you are communicating with a prospect, whether in person, by fax, by email, phone, correspondence, whatever, provide something of value. No, your brochure doesn't count. This is the education aspect we talked about. Okay, you can give away only one of two classes of value: tangibles, such as books, tapes, articles, documents, etc., or intangibles, such as advice, referrals, feedback. Even empathetic listening is a value. Not a coach out there would argue with that. The idea is to have the prospect think, if I'm receiving this much value in a casual contact, how much would I receive if I actually hired this person? And we're really talking a lot about the education-based marketing approach here. The articles or advice don't have to be yours. Simply providing something that the prospect can use, no matter what the source, and assuming you use proper attribution, creates values in the eye of the client. Okay? When I learned that one prospect was a wine aficionado, I sent along a list of an expert's choices of the best domestic wines. The value doesn't have to be business related, but it should stop short of gratuitous gifts, like bribery. If you're seeing a prospect in person, either bring something along or provide it immediately after the meeting. Prospects must see something of value beyond your charming personality. You can manage this aspect of the sales process, whether your consultant work is as a generalist or in computers or outplacement sales, anything. Just ask yourself, how will the prospect be better off having touched me, having been in communication with me, having interacted with me? Okay? Never allow the discussion with the prospect to focus on fees. Once that occurs, you're constantly on the defensive, trying to explain your contribution. Most embattled consultants resort to a description of the tasks they plan to perform, thereby aggravating the issue by allowing the prospect to zero in on irrelevant matters such as how many days are sure to be spent on site, how much time is required to tabulate a survey, how many people are necessary to do the job, yada, 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 okay, ad infinitum. That's what we talked about earlier on in the other sections about not itemizing as well. But it's very easy to become defensive when a person starts pushing on fees and price, to start pulling out that itemized list and say, well, here's everything you get with that, and you leave the realm of value, you leave the realm of benefit, and you instead start justifying that through activity. We've said it too many times. Don't price on activity. Don't defend your price from an activity standpoint. Okay? If you're providing value and you've done the job right, you've had their buy-in, everything we've already talked about, if you've gotten their buy-in on what they want to have happen, if you've got the subjective input on those objectives as well as the objective input, if you've connected their emotions, if you've allowed them to tell you that it's a $6.9 million turnover problem, then when you go to deliver value, the only thing you need to justify is, Mr. Smith, we're going to deliver a $1 million benefit to you by reducing your $6.9 million losses by $1 million. Or $2 million or $3 million or whatever it is, and we're going to charge you X to do it. Okay? When they still push on price, be ready to walk away, because that's all you can say. Don't fall into the trap of, well, outside of $1 million, we're going to give you X many hours, and we're going to do all of this, and I'm going to provide all of that. Value, value, value. That's all that you should be doing. Always focus on value. Move the prospect's attention to the outcomes of the engagement and the impact of the results on the prospect's business. This avoids the task of and commodity concerns of how much time or how many people, and instead focuses on the results, the real objectives near and dear to the prospect's heart. If you're faced with the question, can't we do this for less? Simply reply, of course. Which value would you like to eliminate? Should we focus only on the field and not on the home office? Or eliminate the plans to get customer responses, or forget about the coaching that was to follow the feedback? And leave it in their lap, okay? If they don't want to get that price, they don't want to get that value. Prospects always want to reduce fees, just expect it, but they never want to eliminate value. You control that dynamic by managing the conversation in a given direction. And it's never the prospect's business to help determine how many focus groups or how many interviews or how much training or how much observation or how much anything else you do in the course of gathering information and formulating recommendations. That's why you are the consultant, and the prospect has called you. Never surrender your expertise to a committee. Okay? Back to the medical analogy. Don't let the patient tell you, the doctor, what tests he is or isn't willing to pay for, but then demand the benefit and the value of becoming healthy like he wants. You're the expert. A lot of this is driven by a lack of willingness to walk away from the client. Okay? And we have seen that be the number one key problem. People will get into defensive mode and start itemizing the actions and the tasks and the itemized deliverables that they're going to give, creating a commodity mentality because they're afraid of losing the business. Stand your ground, make the value about what their benefit is, make it clear, make sure they understand the perceived value, make sure they understand the monetary damage that's taking place in not correcting this problem. In other words, what is it costing them today? What's this critical issue costing them money-wise? Not spirits, not goodwill, not emotions, not employee loyalty or satisfaction, none of that. All of those point to one thing, money. What does the implication mean monetarily to that client? And when you've done that, you put out your proposal on the value you'll deliver, connect the return on that investment, and when they push back, and if they insist on price concessions, it only happens with removing value. And if you can fight back that fear of saying, I'm going to walk away from this client, you'll stand your ground and stop right there. There will be no more activity from you. When that happens, many times, believe it or not, you're trusting in faith, but believe it or not, they'll take the deal. Okay? A lot of it has to do with your confidence in defending that value. If you equivocate, if your confidence flutters just the littlest bit, they'll perceive that as you doubting your value. So if you don't believe in that value, don't charge it because you won't be able to defend it. Believe in that value. Listen from the best practices that we've gathered from people that make 7 figures and more doing this all over the world every day. They stand their ground. They defend their value, and if the client's not willing to pay that, or if they haven't managed to convince the client of that value, they haven't done their job as a consultant, in other words, then they're ready to walk away from that business. That's going to wrap up step 4, the deploy step. And let's move now into the final piece of the IMX process, talking about step 5. Okay, the 3 R's: review, readjust, redeploy. Step 5 is an ongoing process of continual review, adjustment, and redeployment. These are the 3 key benefits to this step. It ensures and makes sure that your value dynamics are fluid and it changes in the environment, which, if missed, could derail your ultimate value. Okay, so it's constantly reassessing, it's constantly watching, and it's a nice way to get your head out of the trees and make sure that you're still on path to deliver the value, because once you get into that project, many times you find new information, new things, or it's easy to have what we used to call in the military mission creep. You get focused so closely on what you're doing that you lose sight of the overall big picture. It also exposes flaws or new information and adjusts accordingly to ensure that that value is delivered. And following step 5, expands your business by discovering new ways to add value and new opportunities to grow your business within the client's company. Let's look at the review stage. Review is a never-ending process of monitoring what should be happening and seeing if it really is happening. It involves using some kind of metric that's tied to results, performance, satisfaction, sales, efficiency ratings, whatever. Whatever the company measure is that you are trying to have a positive effect on, there is almost always some measurement of it either already in place or one you can create for the purposes of tracking performance. We recommend setting out a regular schedule of review, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, even annually. It depends on the scope of your project. And we talk about it right up front in the value building stage, even before the contract is signed. It's important, it's imperative that you talk about this before the contract is signed. A common outcome of regular and in-depth reviews is more business. Often, once you're actually in the organization working, you will turn up other problems or opportunities that develop that were not within the scope of your original work. Some of these may be completely separate opportunities in the stuff of your next proposal, but many times they're things that you only now, once you're on the journey, see as having a vital impact on the delivering that successful value proposition itself. Often, however, what you run into once inside the company while working is something that does impact the work you're delivering right now, something you may need to factor in order to achieve and deliver the originally committed work. Regularly review greatly decreases the chance that you will deliver what was promised activity-wise, but miss the mark values-wise. Okay, again, regular review greatly decreases the chances that you will deliver what you promised or expected from activity, but miss the mark from the actual value. In other words, sometimes the missile needs to change course after launch. When this happens, it's time to redeploy and readjust. If it's something that affects the existing assignment, you need to do that right then and there. But many times, the discoveries lead to new consulting engagements that can become your next proposal, following on the heels of your last successful engagement, or in order to add to that value. There are 3 core types of metrics we talk about. Short-term measures, and these would include weekly sales reports, monthly attribution reports, attrition reports, customer feedback forms, things in that class. There are long-term measures, and these would include examples like departmental goals being achieved, executive behavioral change, changes in the public image, things that aren't going to be picked up on a weekly or even a monthly kind of report. And then there are client-specific measures. Virtually all clients will have some measures unique to their particular culture and business. These might include additional businesses sold by a call center, or reduction in repetitive repair calls by an appliance company, or renewed policies by an insurance firm. Whatever they are, almost all clients have their own internal metrics. And remember, these metrics can extend annualized benefits for some number of years to you. In other words, a 10% increase in client referrals this year will lead to a 14% next year on a larger client basis. Similarly, $140,000 in cost reductions this year also applies to every year thereafter, that those procedures are still in effect. So keep the bigger picture in mind. One of the tools you have in your IMX tool bag is called the Business Health Checkup. These tools will help you establish a baseline of performance that exists before you get started. This is a great tool to begin using as a metric, in other words. Okay? This is a tool we strongly recommend you use in the very beginning, going back to step 2. So if you're following the IMX process, you already have this complete set of metrics at your disposal. We recommend you use this as one of your main metrics to set a starting point and measure the return on investment once you're done by having the same respondents complete the business health checkup after you're finished. After you've done that work, maybe several months later, or at a significant enough point into the work to expect changes, depending again on the scope of that work. If it's a 1-year project, you may want to look at using a business health checkup to gauge those reviews every quarter. Okay? But if it's a 3-month project or a 6-month project, you may just redo a business health checkup at the very end of it. Okay? So, let's summarize everything we've talked about. Now that you've read all the details of each step, go back to page 4 again and look at how easy the flow is. This is the visual, okay? It really is a very simple process. It does require, however, discipline to follow the order of the steps and possesses the tools to lean on to do that. We've provided you with these tools, so you get to bring the discipline. All right? We can't do anything for you there. Walk through page 4 a couple of times and imagine yourself watching a movie in your head that plays a video of you having done this with one of your clients. How does it look? How does it feel? Can you see how simple it was? Can you create a real historical film reel to watch yourself? Once you can see this vision in your head, your chances of making it real increase exponentially. There's a whole lot we could talk about with regard to synthetic experiences and the mind's belief structure, but that's a discussion for another time. Just know, based on the actual axiological experience that we're experts in, the more real you can make that movie where you see yourself walking a client through that process to the end solution, and it's successful for both of you, the more likely you'll be to actually do that in real life. You have to first know where you're going before you can know how to get there, and being able to clearly see that place in your head is the key. Just remember, the IMX process is not some theoretical abstract, some hypothesized theory on how a consultant could do a better job of growing his business and working a client through a process. It's based on best practices. Everything you've read in the IMX process or listened to here on these podcasts on the IMX process is real. It's been captured from consultants who have done it with real clients for many years and with much success. And I mean that success not just financially, but the security of their consulting practices. The happiness, very important, the happiness with which they run that business, okay? And the financial success as well. The entire IMX process is a wonderfully complex yet incredibly simple tool for you, the consultant, to use. As you get into it, as you start to watch it work with your clients, you'll see that there are all kinds of things taking place underneath the surface. But the psychology of the sales and the psychology of the movement from the consultant's perspective and the client's perspective is very robust. Okay? There's a lot of reasons, in other words, why this process works. We're not going to discuss them in here too much. We've already discussed them slightly, but we don't want to turn this into a 500-page tome on psychology of selling and consulting and engagements and things like that. This process, if followed, will deliver significant value to you. And I just want to reiterate, it's because we've captured it from the best practices of some of the best consultants we've worked with and who are using the Intermetrics products out there in the field. World-renowned experts, million-dollar consultants generating their own business. That's not $1 million from their entire firm. That's just their own billings. And people that are absolute experts in understanding some of the psychology of peak performance and sales and consulting. So benefit from it, learn from it. It's a part of your certified Intermetrics consultant certification. So I hope you appreciate that value. And if you have any questions, as always, ask your master distributor or come directly to us here at Intermetrics. Best of luck, great success, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks.